again. This is Point on Pally, and if you can't tell by the intro to this video, we're going to do things a little bit differently for this video series. Instead of doing just a one-off tutorial, something like that, we're actually going to build an entire rig together, from beginning to end, top to bottom, the whole kit and caboodle. Um, so I wanted to take you through all the way from the pre-production process of which model to pick and why I would pick it, all the way from the rig building to the facial rigging to the weight painting to the very end and cleanup and all of that. I thought that would be kind of a more interesting way to take the videos in this channel. So um, I'll kind of break down how these videos are going to lay out, and then we'll kind of get started into pre-production. So the first video here is going to be kind of an introduction and going into like the beginning process of the rig, picking the model, what we're going to do on it, why we're doing it, all of that. Video 2, we'll get started in the rigging process. We'll start with the lower body here, like this bottom portion with tentacles. Next video will go through the torso. Um, Fourth video will go through rigging the arms and hands and shoulders. Next video will be the neck, the head, and I might include facial rigging with that because that part won't take very long, just rigging the neck and the head. After that we'll go into weight painting, and after that cleanup. And I might kind of adjust where these videos might be based on how we're progressing with this rig over time. Um, so let's get started with the pre-production here. And if you've looked at my channel before, you might have seen the lower half of this character. I did a podcast on the advanced sine wave expression, and I used this model. I've had this model for several years now, but I've never actually built a full rig for him. And I thought he was an interesting looking model, something that would be a little bit different to start for this series, which is why I picked him. And speaking of interesting, that is kind of where I want to start, and that is what model to pick for a demo reel. Now, if you're just starting out, you might want to go with, a biped character, a quadruped character, something that can show like your rigging basics. But once you get beyond that, I like to pick every character I pick for a personal rig, for my personal demo reel. I like to pick something that is a little different, a little unique, and most importantly, I'd like to pick something where I can test a new rigging method out, or if there's something I haven't done in a while and I want to test it. Just something that will allow me to push my skills even further. And one reason why I wanted to pick this guy, um, this Aku character, for those who have watched the show Samurai Jack, the reason I wanted to pick him is I wanted to build a character with ribbons, with ribbon rigs, and that's going to be the overall theme of this character. Because for those who have watched the Samurai Jack show, this character is very exaggerated. Now, he's a much more, I would say, hyper-realistic version of the character from the animated series, but he still has stuff that would allow for very cartoonish, movements. The tentacles, the very elongated torso, the elongated neck, all of this stuff could lend itself very well to, kind of a cartoonish setup. And there is really no better cartoonish setup for something like this than using ribbons. They are a very, very effective means of doing cartoonish rigs. So that is pretty much going to be the foundation for this character. We're going to use ribbons to rig each tentacle down here, the torso, the arms, and the neck as well. So we're going to try and use ribbons anywhere we can to really push that exaggerated um, animation. And usually when I build a rig, I start with kind of an initial breakdown or an outline of what I want to do with this character. And I have right here is kind of my initial outline for the character. So this is everything we're going to try and build on this rig. And I kind of break it down into body parts or just pieces in general. So to start with the lower body, we're rigging the tentacles using ribbons. Um, I marked IK here because that's kind of the reason why I want to use ribbons for the tentacles. Is I want to have an IK setup for them, and we'll get to why in a minute. We're going to use nonlinear deformers as blend shapes. This is fairly standard now with ribbon rigs to use uh, duplicates as blend shapes and have nonlinear deformers on them to really push and exaggerate the kinds of movements that you can do with the ribbon. We're going to have, and going along with the nonlinear deformers and blend shapes and all that, we're going to have controls for the individual tentacle as well as a master control to kind of control everything all at once. So you don't have to animate every single icon. For the tentacle, you have one that can just control everything. And we'll have a switch to kind of give control to either or. And here are the nonlinear deformers that we're going to have on the blend shapes. These will be kind of funneled into the initial ribbon on each of the tentacles down here. We're going to have a sine wave. And what I want to do is I want to have a switch for what controls the actual movement of the sine wave. Because the nonlinear deformer sine wave, it's just an attribute that controls the sine wave movement. But we can funnel into an attribute on the sine wave that can move this sine wave for us, and we can control that. I want to set up a switch to control it either with the time itself of the timeline, with the movement of the center of gravity icon. So as the center of gravity icon moves forward, that triggers the sine wave animation, and also just the attribute that comes on the sine wave. So I want to have like a control to um, manipulate the sine wave with each of these here. We're also going to have a squash and stretch deformer on each of them, a twist deformer, a roll deformer. So what I mean by roll, it's going to be a bend deformer, but we're going to use it to kind of mimic how you would roll up, how you would coil the tentacle, kind of how you'd roll up a rug or like one of those party favors, how it kind of coils up. Um, and so I want to have a separate blend shape just for that. And then we'll also have one for an just a generic FK setup, um, so that we can have some type of FK control for the tentacles along with the default kind of IK setup. Now, I had mentioned before that we want to mimic an IK setup, and the reason for that, you'll see right here, I have in quotations here walking hips. And the reason what that is going to refer to is I wanted to try test something out here where I could have kind of this bottom piece that all the tentacles are connected into to almost kind of walk a little bit, kind of like almost like a quad setup where each quadrant of this bottom setup is going to be able to like shift forward. So the character almost kind of will look like this thing is walking, but I want to keep the ends of the tentacles kind of planted on the ground almost. That's more so something I just want to test to see if it actually works. Um, Plus, I think it would look cool if you wanted to do something like that for a demo reel. It's something I would like to see if it could work. So we'll test that out and see if that actually does work. So that's the main reason why I wanted to use the ribbon rings here, because if you, as I mentioned before, or maybe I haven't, but if you followed my YouTube channel, I had a video on there of the advanced sine wave expression, and you would recognize the bottom of the character here because I used that setup, or I used this character for that setup. It was a simple FK setup for each tentacle, and that advanced sine wave went through it. So to kind of mimic what we would do with the sine wave deformer on the blend shape here. Now, why wouldn't I just use the advanced sine wave? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, that advanced sine wave only really works for an FK setup, and I do want to test an IK setup here, so that advanced sine wave expression wouldn't really jive with the IK setup here. And two, while that advanced sine wave is really impressive with what it can do, it's a very intense expression, meaning there's a lot of math involved, and expressions are one of the slowest things that calculates within Maya. So it's going to run rather slow, and especially with each tentacle here. So I believe there's 13 here. That's a lot, and it does, when all of them are active at once, it does slow it down a little bit. Now, if I were to just do a simple FK setup here, I absolutely would use the advanced sine wave expression for it. But since I am going to use an IK setup for the tentacles with this ribbon rig, the advanced sine wave expression wouldn't really work here. So cover the walking hips here, and the sliding geo on the hips front. What I mean by that is this little section right here, I wanted to include something that would kind of have the front of this section here kind of lift up and roll. Um, I wanted to mimic something that was done in the Monsters Inc. movies. There was the character, I can't remember her name, but she kind of slithered on the floor, and the bottom of the character would kind of lift up and roll as she moved. So I kind of want to mimic that, and I'll show you what that's going to look like when we actually tackle that part of the character. Um, so that's pretty much it for the lower part of the body. The torso is also going to have a ribbon rig up here. Oops, let me bring that back up here. Um, Torso is also going to have a ribbon rig. And we're also going to have nonlinear deformers on it. And I also want a switch control for the upper body following. So I want to have the ability to have, for the upper body here, to not only to kind of move independently of what's happening in the torso here, um, but also follow it if I want to, and kind of have a switch to turn that on and off. The reason why, one thing I wanted to try for this character is to have the torso here kind of, I want to have one of those sine wave deformers on a blend shape to affect the kind of the bottom of the torso here, while the top part is not being affected by it. Kind of almost like a snake thing, where like the top part is kind of lunging up, but the bottom part is waving down here. Um, but I also, if I have a twist deformer and I want the character to twist on it, I want the upper body to follow that twist as well. So that's kind of what I want for the torso there. Arms and hands, um, specifically the arms. I mean, we're going to use ribbons on the arms as well. That'll work on top of an IKFK setup that we'll put on here. And So control for the root of the arm here. What I'm referring to is right around here. So you can tell by looking at it that we don't actually have the root of the arm here. The arm kind of just goes into the torso here, like into this like chest plate here. So we don't actually have something to control the root of the arm, which may cause issues for how the arm bends. It might cause issues around the edge. And it may cause issues when the arm bends forward. This chest plate might get in the way. So one way I've thought of maybe counteracting that is having some control here to be able to slightly shift the position of the root of the arm, so that we can angle the arm in the direction we want. It's not kind of digging into the chest plate here, or if we're lifting the arm up, things like that. So we want to control for the root of the arm for sure. The neck and the head, we're going to use a ribbon rig for the head. Nonlinear twist controlled by head. So this is something I had also mentioned for the torso, how I wanted the upper body to follow the torso when it twists. I want the head to dictate the twist of the ribbon here. So we use a nonlinear twist deformer on a blend shape, and I want the head control here to dictate the twist of that. And a switch control to have the head following. So maybe we want to have the head move kind of independently of the neck, or meaning like when the neck is moving, head stays still, that kind of thing, similar to what we have for the torso. Now the face rig, um, we're going to use mostly blend shapes. We may use for like jaw control and eyelids and things. We may not actually use blend shapes for that because it's usually easier to do just with joints. But we're going to follow the FACS system. And when we get into the face rigging, we'll go over the FACS system and what it is and how we're going to use it here. Just know that FACS system is referring to the facial action coding system, and it deals with different poses that your face can make. And so we'll be building blend shapes off of each of those poses. And I'll show you what those poses are when we get there. We're also going to use combination corrective shapes. This is in practice used in the industry, specifically in video games these days, where you have when certain blend shapes are combined with others, it may cause double transforms or some odd movements. So you'll have an additional blend shape that only activates when those blend shapes are working together to correct those mistakes. So that's what I am referring to that. And then we'll have one on weighting. We probably won't weight the entire character. We'll go over some weighting practices that I do in the beginning, and then we'll move on to, and then we'll kind of just skip forward. You probably won't need to see an entire long video on me just weighting this entire character. So we'll kind of chop that up as we need to. All right, so now that we've gone through the outline, and we may add things or take things out as we go along, like depending on if something works or not. But for the most part, this is pretty much set in what we're going to do here. So I think we'll start, since the next video I want to get into the tentacles, we'll just do some quick pre-pro here, getting the character set up. So we've got some geometry here. These are kind of, there's a couple of high-res pieces of geometry here and a couple with like a mouth open here for a fun face shape there that was given to me by the modeler. But for the geometry that we've got here, we're just going to quick group that all together. Just call that geogroup. Just clean everything up here. So the first thing I want to do is get the master control icon all set up here. So we'll do that real quick. So I just got just a generic NURB circle in here. Just rotate that into position. And I'll freeze transforms on the guy. There we go. So I'll scale them up to a nice little size here. And we'll just quick. This is something I like to do with each character because I don't like just having a generic circle on the ground, especially if like the character is going to be near a piece of geometry. Oops, skip one. If the character is going to be like standing on the floor, this circle may go through the floor, and that's not necessarily something I want to do. So I just quick take every other CV here. I'll take the bottom ones here, bring those down a little bit, just so we can get some variation in the control here, something like that. And we'll color it yellow here. If you're unaware of how to color objects, if you're very new to this, if you're not new to this, you should definitely know how to do that already. But just for a quick reference, go to the attribute editor, go to object display. You can do it on the icon itself. Go to display, drawing overrides, enable overrides, and then just move this slider to get to, since it's a central icon, I like to use the yellow color for that. That's kind of industry standard there. So I'll just call this CT move all icon, or you can call it master control icon, doesn't really matter, but we'll freeze transforms on them. And there we go. So I'm just going to quick group the master control icon here. We'll call this controls group. and we'll do a rig group for the joints. That'll come there. Well, when we actually start building the rig, we'll put all the joints and everything in there. And we'll just group all this together. And we'll just call this Aku group. Alright, so now we've got kind of the outliner cleaned up and ready to go. The next thing I want to do, before we do any sort of rig building or anything like that, the first thing I want to do is split off the head for blend shapes. And now the reason I do that is when we do start working with the facial blend shapes here for this character, we need, I don't want to duplicate this entire model every single time. The file size would get massive. I just want to be able to duplicate the head. And in order to do that, we need to disconnect it. And it's important to do this before you start doing any sort of weight painting or anything like that, because this is going to drastically, because splitting off the head after that is going to affect the model and everything like that. So, all right, so we're just going to quick disconnect the head here. And I already have a video on my YouTube page to do that, but I'll just go through the process pretty quickly here. So you just grab an edge loop that's below the head. If you wanted to include like neck muscles as part of your blend shapes or anything like that, for when like the jaw flexes or things like that, you might want to go down a little bit lower here, but we're just going to stick to the primary face area here. With the edge selected, we just go to Edit Mesh, Detach, just like that. And with Object Mode, just go to Mesh, Separate. So we've got the face separate here, looking good. So we're just going to duplicate that guy and move him over to the side. We'll just call this guy V-Shapes Base, just so we can mark what it is. And we'll reattach the head to the body now. So important, just to remember, select the main body, select the head first, then shift click the body. Always make sure you select the head first. So that way the head's vert count gets priority. So that way the blend shapes will actually work because it's based on vertex number. So if you were to select the body first, then the head, then the vertex numbers on the head would change. But when you select the head first, then the body, the head vert numbers stay the same. So with the head first, body second, to mesh, combine, and we'll just try and select the verts here and merge them. So usually the easiest way to do it is if you see that plus sign on the arrow, that means you know you're getting the other set of verts. And shift click again to get the second set of edge loops. So you should have everything together now, which I do, just to test it. And at this point, we can go to Edit Mesh, Merge. Now I know you can do it based on threshold, but there's a lot of verts very close together here. I don't want to risk, merging something that wasn't supposed to be merged. So I'll just click Merge here. Looking good. I don't see any other verts that got merged or anything like that. All right, looking good. Now that edge, you can see that edge is a little bit sharp there. So what we might do is just double click that edge and we'll go to soften edge there. So that way it looks nice and clean there from where it got attached. And we can just delete history on that guy. We don't really want to have history once we start like attaching it to the rig and all of that, because it starts to drastically slow Maya down once you do that. So we get the history all clean. Looks good. I might just test it with a quick blend shape, just really quick here, just to make sure everything looks good. And turn off check topology, that's what that error is for. There we go. So we get the test here. Turn it on just to make sure everything, nothing is moved, which is good. So now we just check just to make sure everything's moving correctly, which it is. All right, so that's good. So we know the blend shape is working properly. And we'll just clean all that up in here. So we get the blend shape space, and we got body low res. I'll put the geo suffix at the end because I like making sure everything is the proper suffix. And I'll just throw this in this group with the face shape there. All right, so we can hide that base because we won't be using it for a while. So now the body is all ready and raring to go. So in the next video, we'll start to tackle rigging the lower body and the tentacles. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more of this series and to keep my channel going. And onward to the next video.